as we inch closer to the convention, the campaigns are reportedly looking into potential running mates now. Washington Post reports Republican candidates could make their vice presidential announcements as early as June, the month before the convention. Glenn Hall is here. He's the U.S. editor for the Wall Street Journal. Some names we have here.
Yeah, there's some names being floated. I think it's early days in terms of short lists, but there's a nice long list of people being considered.
Marco Rubio is one of the ones on the list.
Marco Rubio, John Kasich, people are talking about. It makes sense to talk about people who have been in the presidential cycle already, because when they get to the convention, they're going to perhaps have some bartering to do if nobody has all of the delegates. So I'm not convinced that we'll have a name necessarily before we get to the convention, because that may be part of the bargaining that needs to be done. Joni
Ernst is on this list from the Washington Post. She's the senator from Iowa. She laughed when asked about being a candidate for vice president. And then, I don't know all the senators, you know. Don't know Deb Fischer. But Deb Fischer's on the list. Tell me about Deb Fischer. Cruz allies already suggesting names, with one being mentioned, female senators such as Joni Ernst in the Iowa, Deb Fischer.
Look, you know,
Deb Fischer of Nebraska.
It's a question about whether a candidate is looking to balance out some shortcomings in the demographics or their voter support. So having, young, rising star in the Republican like Joni Ernst, or another woman on the campaign to extend your appeal, that works very well in some cases. I'm not 100% sure that's going to be the way that they think about the vice president this cycle, because like everything else in this election cycle, the old rules aren't really seeming to apply.
Yeah. On the Democratic side, Elizabeth Warren at the top of the Washington Post list, which, I mean, that's been floated, but she hasn't even endorsed.
She hasn't endorsed, and she's expressed very little interest in being a part of this presidential cycle. I imagine she might hold out the ambition down the road, but, being a vice president almost can set you back when you're trying to run for president down the road.
Julian Castro mentioned here on the Democratic side, and one I've heard before, housing secretary.
Yeah, he's another one of those rising stars. He and his brother are both, very well known, very well liked. They bring in that Hispanic, voter. They have a big sort of broad-based appeal, especially with younger demographics. So that could work out very well in terms of Hillary Clinton trying to balance out her appeal among younger voters.
Sherrod Brown's on here, Tim Kaine, Thomas Perez, chatter picking up about the labor secretary there, and Amy Klobuchar, not mentioned. Well, Amy Klobuchar is interesting. We've heard that before. She has a lot of experience, I guess it says here.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, a lot of trial balloons are being floated, and some of these names are just being popped out there by people who are interested in seeing their names popped out there, right?
Okay.
I think at this point, the official vetting process is just getting underway at most of these candidates. They're starting to get in the list, and we're hearing that, sometimes they're trying to get a sense of, well, I need to have different types of candidate, depends on the situation I find myself in down the road. So I need to have different types of appeal that I'm trying to barter for.
Cory Booker's not on this list.
Yeah.
For a hot minute, everybody was like, oh, Hillary might pick him. We don't have a clue.
No, the calculus is too early. The campaigns are still too raw for us to figure out where the gaps are that need to be filled, that a vice presidential running mate can help in the campaign. And really, until we see a little bit further down the road how these electoral votes are stacking up, I think right now the game is on the Republican side. Who brings me the delegates necessarily, not necessarily who brings me the votes.
I turned the page over to see if I might have missed something, because I don't see Sarah Palin here.
Sarah Palin has been on some lists. She likes to stay in the limelight, but again, these names that are floating about there are just that. They're just floaters.
Yep.
In a little while, we'll start to see short lists emerge and names that have been vetted. And once they start going through that process, you wonder. So somebody like John Kasich, would he allow himself to be vetted at this point? Probably not, because that's a sure sign that he's out, and he doesn't want to admit that yet.
Yep, no way. Nice to see you. Have a good weekend.